Grew up on new wave, but it's a new age where the kids on the fringe have a TV set in their pockets, nowhere to run away. All the freedom, communication, your news station, 24 hours a day. Is there a problem? You tell me what's your name, what's your game? Can hardly wait just to give it away. You're out of your head and out of your mind, so off the wall, but you're still online. Yeah, I found a new place to buy cassette tapes. Now we're rolling around on a box on wheels. No distractions, it's more interactions. I found a new way, reach out and touch faith. And music's that follows me with no distractions. You tell me what's your name, what's your game. Can hardly wait just to give it away. You're out of your head and out of your mind, so off the wall, but you're still online. Yeah. What are we choosing? I feel like you're losing me. But who are we fooling? The voice is loud, but around and around we go. What are we choosing?
Well, man, it's always a disaster when I'm at the helm here of production. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. Very excited to welcome our next guest. She's a new correspondent with us. She's going to be doing her work alongside of us, and we're very excited to introduce her and what she's been doing. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Let's welcome Hazar Alsabagh.
Hello, everyone.
All right, let's see. Did I butcher it? No, we're good.
No, you did it right. Yeah, you pronounced it right.
All right. So let's get a little bit of your history here for the audience that is new to you. My understanding from what I know about you, you're from the Canadian Armed Forces. You served in the artillery, if I'm correct?
No, military intelligence. Yeah.
Wow, that's above me.
In the
Okay.
reserves.
So you're military intelligence in the reserves, that's actually what I wanted to go into, coincidentally.
Yeah, no, to be honest, I didn't really do much, so I don't like to talk much about it because I was only there for a few years, and opportunities arose, circumstances arose, and I had to walk away from it. But I learned a lot from my platoon, from my sergeant, and it was exciting. It was an exciting opportunity at the time.
Well, it's a big deal. Like, for people that don't know, you have to take your testing just to get in, and for some people, they don't qualify even to be that position. So I thought it was like, I'm not trying to downplay here, because I thought it was a big deal when I got it back and I found out I qualified for all these things. I was like, okay, I'm not a dummy. That's how it felt anyways. It's like somebody confirmed it for me. They have this test that's been going around for a long time, and it felt like confirmation.
Oh yeah, it is. It is quite challenging and an arduous process for sure. The psychological and the assessments, and I dare say I didn't do well in some of them either. And then there's an interview process as well, so it can get stressful. And then with the clearance and whatnot, it can the waiting gets there's a lot of anticipation for sure.
The phrase "hurry up and wait" is a very common phrase in the Canadian Armed Forces, unfortunately. Everybody like hurry up. Yeah, that's everybody talked to. I was following there's a big group I was in, Canadian Armed Forces. So all the new people go in there, and I'm still a part of it. I get a kick. Oh, what's happening? Why am I waiting so long on hearing back? It's like, calm down. It's the same story 1,000 different ways. Everybody, hurry up and wait.
Oh, absolutely. And if you're one of those people that loves to move, then it's just to move around and you have to list out all your addresses. Oh, it's going to take forever. You might as well just hurry up and wait.
That was one of the ones that hit me. Every time you move, you have to provide address and reference, I think it was. It's like, come on. It's like, I moved every year because I was in crappy apartments. Why are you putting me on the spot like this?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, So you're running Sunday Preach. Just talk us
Mhm.
through kind of what that is for you, how you came to start doing it, and then I'll go through a few articles I got picked out that were some of the ones that stood out to me before I actually reached out and talked to you. Well, one is. The other one's more recent, but take
Yeah.
it away.
Absolutely. So Sunday Preach started off as a little bit of a pet project for me, and I'm going to try and keep this a short story, although I love telling stories, as you've read on my Sunday Preaches. This all kind of came to be when I turned 30. I feel like I had my midlife crisis a little early, or my identity crisis, rather, and it was also the election year. And I looked at all the parties and I was very disappointed. On my birthday, I realized, oh my God, who am I going to vote for? This was back in April 2019. So, April 2019, I'm already forecasting for October. I was nervous and like I am getting anxiety just looking at the candidates, at the potential of like disaster and whatnot. And decided to throw my hat in the ring and joined. The political venture, did my own campaign with, and joined the People's Party of Canada at the time, and went through that experience. And it was quite honestly the most exhilarating experience I'd ever done. My employer was absolutely gracious and wonderful about it. They gave me the time off to go ahead and discover this new adventure that I wanted to try out. And I learned so much from, never mind the parties and the policies, but learned so much from the people, the politicians. I got to network and knock on doors and meet authentic people with true issues and stories, and learn to empathize. And at the end, I knew I wasn't gonna win. It was a long shot, but I grew to respect the playing field. I grew to respect my opponents. The oh my God, cute kitty.
Yeah, sorry, he's attacking my feet right now. I can't concentrate.
And I grew to respect, the whole process and just people in general. And I realized that we've lost sight of, what's important. We've lost sight of empathy. And in a world that's globalizing at such a rapid pace, where there's so much technology, so much information and misinformation, we tend to desensitize ourselves to it just so that we don't feel so anxious all the time, because
Absolutely.
the more we read about the news, how heartbreaking it is, because we all know inflammatory news is what sells. The more we get upset and angry, and so when we desensitize ourselves, we tend to lock ourselves into boxes, and we lack that empathy, and now we just don't care. And that's what causes polarization in a way as well. So we start to divide, and we start to, resent one another. And instead of coming together and being, and empathizing for one another and understanding and opening these channels of dialogue, we just create these really harsh and toxic environments for ourselves. And so after that campaign, and after losing but giving it my best and making a whole lot of friends, and learning from my opponents and respecting them as well through the process, I realized that I could make more of a difference and an impact by just addressing social issues and drawing back that empathy. So bringing empathy back to life and taking it one step at a time. So not trying to be popular, not trying to, promote myself, but leveraging what little information I have and leveraging my skills on research and writing, and putting myself out there and my experience out there, so that people can start to learn to empathize again and understand what other people are going through. Because there are a lot of points that are valid on the right side of the political spectrum as well as the left.
Yes.
But unfortunately, no one wants to listen. We hear a lot of noise, but no one wants to listen to one another. No one wants to have that dialogue. They're just shouting at each other. And us who are mostly center leaning, whether we're center left or center right, we're just standing there and we're like, I don't care anymore. Desensitized. That's it. And we have a lot of apathy, but no empathy at all for either parties. And we're now stuck in this loophole of, calling each other names and canceling each other out. And it's so tragic to see human beings treating each other this way. And so, as little as I do, I just hope that if I can make a change in one person's life, that for me, that's worth it. and hopefully that continues to grow.
Absolutely. And I think more you're downselling yourself a little bit, because I think culture politics is downstream of culture. So what we're, I often do it to myself too, where I downplay what I've accomplished so far, because I'm always that type too, where I'm looking what's on the horizon. Well, it's okay you can kind of get comfortable with where you've been, but we have an opportunity to reach thousands upon thousands, and that's nothing to scoff at. And I think having the opportunity to, like you said, we don't emphasize with each other anymore. We talk at each other. We're arguing. We allow each other to be gaslighted. We don't always have to agree on issues. But as an example, one of my favorite podcasters is Tim Pool. He's somebody that you would classify as left-leaning, but he presents things in both sides and talks about it. And I understand his point of view. And I'm pretty sure if I was in a room with him, he'd understand mine, even though I have my biases. But I think one of the biggest issues is exactly that we've allowed media and politicians to divide and conquer, to a sense where it's easier to, a lot of these big topics and discussions, like you said, we break ourselves off almost into boxes and tribes. I think that's because it's easier. Like you said, anxious feeling, constantly being, it's like that if you constantly willing to be wrong on things, which if you're going to have an open and transparent view of the world, you always have to be willing to be wrong. And it kind of leads to that inevitably, where you're anxious. I don't know. How do you take that, where people are in this climate, especially with COVID, where we're kind of talking at each other? How do we get beyond that? And I think personally that Sunday Preach and a Diverge Media is exactly how that gets done, is where you just have an open dialogue, at least while we can. I don't know how long we're going to be able to, right?
That's a sad truth. No, you're right. That's exactly it. I think that what we're doing is a good first step. Drawing it to, like, I've read a lot of your posts as well, and I noticed how you remove the biases and you focus on the facts, which is excellent. And I think that will complement what I do, which is more of on a personal level, being vulnerable. I think that those two things together, those two factors together, is what we need to do to reach people, drawing with personal experience, putting our vulnerabilities on, and being willing to expose ourselves that way, and also drawing on the facts of life, which is just a reality, right? With all the research that you do and all the quoting. And this is also why I add references as well, supporting our research, supporting our facts, but also drawing from our empathy and from our experiences to add a little touch of humanity to what we say. I think really goes a long way. I've had, over the last year now, I've been doing Sunday Preach. I think my anniversary is on the next month, at the end of the month of May. And I've had people message me and thank me. And I mean, it's not thousands of people, but it still motivates me to continue to do my work, because people don't seem to think that other people can relate to what they're going through. And when you tell them that you not only hear them, but you know what they're going through, and you can relate, and you put that out there, it really reassures them, and it brings back some humanity in their life, right? So
one of the things in your Facebook profile that I absolutely love, because I say it all the time and I kind of laughed, is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
I have my biases. I know why I believe what I believe, but to communicate a lifetime of understanding and research and what I've looked at into someone who, even if I told them everything exactly the way I was supposed to, they're only going to hold a small fragment of that, because their ability isn't there yet. So I do really try to write in a way that takes my bias out of it. I try to account for the other side, but obviously it's going to shine through, right? Your bias is going to come through,
it's
but
inevitable. Yeah.
I try to do it in a way, and I really appreciate that it is noticeable, but I notice it with you as well. And it's just, we talk about the left and the right, and I kind of think that's ironic, because I just looked at a breakdown of like political ideologies a few weeks ago, and it's like 60% of people would be either left-leaning center or right-leaning center or moderate, dead center. And so this whole discussion where we leave them behind, it's kind of asinine. Like we have a lot more in common with people than we think we do. We're not as divided as we think we are. So let's go. I got something here for you. This is what I read by you. And then I actually reached out to you after this. So it was your post from March 7th, 2021. Sometimes being a B is all a woman has to hang on to. And I burst out laughing when I read this part. So I'm just going to read the full thing here.
Okay.
My dad would often ask me from the time I started school at 4 years old what I wanted to be when I grew up. Since then, I've wanted to be a lawyer, a basketball player, an orthodontist, a gynecologist. I thought that was strange, by the way. A lawyer. And eventually settled to be a disappointment. That's where I burst out laughing. I lawyer and eventually settled to be a disappointment. Seriously, the last time my dad asked me this question 10 years ago, I sighed, looked him straight at him and said, "A disappointment, Dad. I want to be a disappointment." Then he said, "Arab children, I beg you never to be this bold unless you want a flip-flop thrown at you. And not those flimsy dollar store flip-flops either." So, I mean, I read that and I just burst out laughing. I was like, man, I'd have been reading your work for a few months and I was like, I got to reach out to her.
Oh, yeah. It's a true story. Oh, my goodness. And there's a background to that as well. I mean, the gynecologist, yeah, it sounds weird, but back when my second sister was born, she's 10 years younger, there was only one, I think one or two female gynecologists in Mississauga, and I was 10 years old and ambitious, and I told my mom, "Don't worry, I'm going to be the third."
1, 2, 3.
Exactly. I said, I'm going to work my way to that. And that kind of didn't pan out. But no, the disappointment, that was kind of my dad and I, we have a very unique relationship. And I love him so much and I respect him. And I actually just spoke to him this morning. He lives in Dubai. And, we've come a long way, but in my earlier 20s, I was a rebel. I was naive, and I thought I knew everything. And the mail came. There was a letter from the University of Toronto, and I had been put on academic probation because I was, because I had failed. Ironically, this is going to sound funny. I had failed economics and history. And now look at me go. I was chasing after, I was going through an identity crisis. I was chasing after the wrong things. I was circling myself around the wrong people. And I just let the ball drop. And my dad had seen the letter and he was almost in tears. And then I thought I was being funny. And I had to.
It was bad timing, eh? Read the room, Hazar.
I mean, it's funny now. We laugh about it now, but.
Well, that's generally how those things work out, is if they love you enough, it gets to be funny later, but it's not at the time. Mm-hmm. All right. So that was the one I read, but then there's another one here. And this is, you're talking about relating and empathy, but you say this is in a more recent one. Is this, well, where are you really from? April 11th, 2021. So you put this out, and in closing, you had love thy neighbor. So one of the things I actually wanted to point out too as well. I dress like you, speak like you, eat like you, laugh like you, and even change my name for you so you wouldn't be inconvenienced when pronouncing it. Seriously, where are you from? And you were speaking about discrimination of Asians in general. I haven't read that one fully, but
Mm-hmm.
And then you close out with, I wanted to end here. Asians are not your enemy. White people are not the enemy. Arabs are not your enemy. Black people are not your enemy. Let's just start with assuming you have no enemies. The beef you may have is with your incomplete and corrupt government and brown-nosing media outlets. There's no easy way to fight hatred. The truth is that emotions are abstract and not easily quantifiable. Taking hate as an example, 1 minute you can absolutely despise someone and the next they grow on you. So you touch on that there, but you want to just finish your thoughts on where you're going with that?
Yeah, so I wanted to address the fact that, and I hope to continue this in a next post, but being a linguist, I have a master's in linguistics, and I understand that language can be a little bit difficult to understand and to use. In fact, being able to communicate effectively, right, whether it's writing or through speech, is an art, and reaching people is an even more in-depth skill. And words like hate, racism, love, words that circle around emotions and feelings, they're typically abstract because they change over time and space. That's what people don't seem to understand these days, is when you call someone a racist, or when you experience, or when you hate on somebody, it can be momentarily. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you don't have to be a racist for the rest of your life. You could actually grow and evolve and learn. And so, you may even be a great person, but may hold some some racial biases that you didn't even know you held because of your upbringing or because of your circumstances and experience. And so, what I wanted to address in this particular article is the fact that, that people are hating on a certain group of people, like Asians, for example, particularly talking about Asians right now because of what's been happening over the last year and the rise in anti-Asian crimes in North America, and wanted to address that. We have to take a step back and just breathe for a minute and look at government and people in a different light. You may hate the Chinese government, but that doesn't translate to hating Chinese people. It should never. In fact, hate is a strong word. I wouldn't even use that for government. I don't hate anybody. You may be critical of a government, but you're not of a people, and people are confusing that. And so that's why I want to shed light on these words that are abstract, that aren't meant to be generic, that don't meant to be used to generalize an entire race or an entire ethnic group, right? I mean, we talk a lot about, we make a lot of stereotypes about white people these days. And we say, oh, white people this, white people that, or what have you. And, but the general consensus is we know that not all white people are bad. We know that not all white people are racist. We know that they're not all, full of hate. But we don't seem to express that properly, because the way we speak, we sound like we're saying we hate everybody that is white. We hate everyone that is Asian. We, hate everyone that is Black, and so on. So there's a lot to unpack there. And I think it starts with words. One of my ultimate goals with Sunday Preach is to visit abstract words and explain how continuous they can be or how they can be captured in a moment of time.
No, it's a very crucial conversation. It's one that's not allowed to be had anymore. And I think I've had this conversation before. It's like, you talk about prejudices you may not know you have. It's like, if you spent your whole life around white people, as an example, and they have a certain culture, and you might not even realize it, and then you go around somebody with different customs and cultures. And so, for me, I always think back to my time in Peru. I went to Peru. I didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any Spanish, and they didn't speak any English to me the entire time I was there. And so I kind of got inundated with it. And then I learned a lot through that process because I was forced to just observe and realizing, family is huge there in their culture, and they look out for one another like crazy, to the point where I have my friend, Caesar, if you're watching, I'm sorry, I can't go down there. I'm not going to be going out to Simcoe at 10:30 at night tonight, but he still calls me and he texts me and, hey, how are you doing? Because I went to Peru with him a couple of times. We're good friends, and it's like he's extended family now. But it's little things like that. I've never, I might have said things that early on that if he didn't have thicker skin, maybe it would have been offensive, but he never said it to me. He just loved me along the way. And I like to think I try to love everyone and be kind to everyone the same. But I think when you gaslight from a media standpoint, and that's where that words, and you back people in the corners with boxes and labels, and these conversations, they're going to lash back. And then it's those things that you force them in the darkness. Yeah. And so it only gets worse. Now it's an echo chamber of same ideas or worse ideas. And it's absolutely one of the things I've never wanted to see happen. And so I don't care where you fall on the political spectrum. If we stop having, I always laugh, don't talk about politics and religion. We've all heard that. And I go the complete opposite way. It's like, those are the two of the most important things in life. Shouldn't we talk about? The question is, why can't we talk about them? We should have conversations about them in a respectful way where you don't feel attacked for your beliefs and I don't feel attacked for mine. And let's try that. And now sometimes there won't be common ground. And I think that's where people fixate on the extremes instead of the commonality. But like, most people just want to be left alone. Most people just want to be able to provide for their family, work, live a good life, and be left alone. And that's probably 60% of all people. And so if you focus on those, maybe we can get beyond this division. But I think the media is a big part of that, where they jump at labels, they jump at certain aspects. Even if you say a catchword, like there's a buzzword, you say something, you talk a certain way, and then they'll attack that, and then you're in a label with a different
Exactly.
group, and it just makes conversation impossible. And if the goal is really uniting people and having people understand, be compassionate and loving towards one another, then we need to seek to understand each other.
Mm-hmm.
Then we need to stop with the divisive language and things that further divide people.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that the fact that, that they're lobbyists and they're government funded plays a huge role in how the media controls everyone, the perception, right?
No, the
Especially,
untalked about things, 700
yeah,
million reasons to not go away from the
yeah,
government narrative.
exactly. Because the government also has a job. Their duty is to remain relevant, right? We always advocate for smaller government. I think everybody agrees. I think the majority of people agree that, less government involvement is a good thing, can be a good thing in any country because we want to be autonomous. We want to be able to provide for ourselves and be self-sufficient. We want a natural and organic ecosystem. But governments are made of human bodies and public servants. And, when they become irrelevant or when they have, met their goals or accomplished, and they realize that we're no longer needed, they need to find a reason to stay alive, to keep their jobs. And so the only way they could do that is by tugging at our heartstrings, by grasping at emotionally triggering topics and deflecting and throwing it back at us, right? Like Doug Ford is a perfect example these days, blaming the youth for COVID-19 when we all know that he could have handled this pandemic a little more proactively from the get-go. He was off to a good start. Then he just kind of fell off the wagon, and now he's being reactive. And people who are reactive seek to look to blame others. And the others are his people. And to the point where he talks to us like he's our dad. It's really insulting. Like I'm an adult. Talk to me like an adult.
Stop saying friends, please.
Yeah. Don't look at me and say, don't make me go out there. Like, seriously, what are you like? Are my dad? No, you're not my dad. My dad doesn't even talk to me like that anymore. At some point, you got to talk to us like we're grown adults.
Do you feel like that's like you say there's always a need for government. Do you feel like when things, you get to a point where things are so good that eventually that's where society, democracies end up? And that's like that 100-year cycle history looks back at, where every empire seems to fall within 100 years. It's like they build something, it's great, then people keep going, well, give me more. And it's like nobody ever stops and goes, hey, let's just manage this so that it stays good for a long time.
Yeah.
And it seems to be, it's always like you said, they pull out the emotional heartstring. What can I bribe you with this election? And then they're reaching in your back pocket, dangling the other bill out of your pocket in front of your face.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And keeping us divided actually works to their benefit, because as long as we keep fighting, they remain relevant as long as we keep fighting amongst one another. That's just one way of doing it. Of course, there are other ways, that government remains relevant. Like I mentioned a couple times in my posts about Harry Aslinger, I can't pronounce his name, the FBI agent who in the 30s, after the prohibition was lifted, his job was non-existent. He was no longer relevant. How is he going to feed his family? How is he going to try and remain relevant? Well, he planted a seed and created a problem, created a war on drugs with, what's his face? Nixon.
People don't want to believe, though. This is one of the consistent roadblocks I run into, and I'll ask you about this. But people don't want to believe there's malicious people, like people that would do malicious things because it's in their benefit. They're like, oh, they wouldn't do that if it hurts so many. I have a friend like that. I'm like, you're pretty naive. Like, because I go the complete opposite way, where I think people that want to do those type of things find the positions where they can do those type of things.
Yeah. I mean, we have a whole world war that is a perfect example of malicious people. I mean, 5%, the 5% in Germany won and created the Nazi Party. That's a huge example of malicious people. Like, there are terrible people, and if we let them control, the narrative, it's very scary what they are capable of.
And worse with the Nazis is they systematically murdered the Jews at the cost of losing the war. That's how much they hated the Jews.
Yeah,
and they were willing, at their own detriment, basically, to lose the war so they could continue to systematically kill people in the death camps. It was just nuts.
Horrible. Mm-hmm.
But no, that's in the past. People are never like that again, Hazar.
What was I thinking?
It will never happen again. So Well, I want to ask one more question. Obviously, COVID is a big topic, but like the last year in review, I mean, my personal view is they've had a full year to kind of come up with a different approach. I just did the No More Lockdowns COVID Summit with world-renowned epidemiologist, the former chief medical officer of health for all of Ontario, basically saying lockdowns are causing more harm than good. They advocate for the Great Barrington Declaration, basically targeted prevention, protect the most elderly, protect the elderly and those under 70, 99.95% survival. That's a quote from one of the doctors on the panel. And it just doesn't make sense. And so I go this way with it. We've had healthcare problems in Ontario for 20, 30 plus years. Doug Ford ran on ending hallway medicine, and apparently now it's all our fault. So I'll give you the floor and see what you think about that. But I think he just did a 180, and now it's the perfect storm where they can spin a political narrative of an old issue that's reoccurring. And specifically, I'll bring this up here just before we go in here. This is CBC from Ontario, January to June 2019, the 181-day span. 40 hospitals were above 100% capacity for the entire year.
Wow.
So that's CBC that reported on here. Yeah, here it is. 40 hospitals averaged 100% capacity or higher during that time. So my point on all this is now it's our fault that the hospitals aren't overrun. I can go through that. But if they were, suddenly now it's our fault, even though this has been a reoccurring problem, as we can see through CBC's own reports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this so every time I think of Doug Ford, I just want to laugh, cry, because I unfortunately voted for that guy, and
Same.
I had such high hopes, and I have long missed Kathleen Wynne because at least
things you thought you would never say.
I know. I would rather pay for more hydro than deal with whatever's going on here. But no, to speak to your point, so Dougie is doing exactly what any typical politician that is in hot water is doing. He is deflecting. He is trying to gain control. He knows he's lost control of the population. I mean, the gatherings, or not the gatherings, the protests are rather small. And they're, we're not to a point where we're fed up. There's a delicate balance between mental health and physical health and the economy that needs to be upheld. And he's failing. He is reactive. And in order for us not to see those shortcomings and those failures, he is lashing out at us and blaming us. And he's hoping that with that kind of gaslighting, and with our emotional stress right now, what we're going through, we would actually start to blame ourselves and accept this, or blame our neighbors and start ratting on each other and turning against each other. So we're not thinking about all of the things that he's failed to do at this point. I think, yeah. And it's not just his fault though. I don't want to throw him under the bus for everything. Like you said, we've had healthcare issues for 20 plus years. Nobody seems to have forecasted the need for better quality hospitals and more staffing of nurses and doctors. And not just that, incentivizing and appreciating our frontline workers. I remember sitting in a walk-in clinic in 2015, waiting for a doctor and seeing a notice to see that their appointments, they get paid by appointment on top of other incentives and other subsidies, of course, but they went from getting paid, I think it was $28 an appointment to $24 an appointment. And it's like, really, these are doctors. Like they're working practically they're not working like American doctors. They're not millionaires. Can we show them a bit of gratitude and forecast a potential where we would need, a robust healthcare, where we treat them with respect? That way, our doctors don't decide to, leave our healthcare system and move to the U.S. or move anywhere else where they would have better opportunities for and would be valued for the work that they do. I mean, same thing with our nurses. Our nurses are incredible. They're fantastic, and we treat them like garbage. I'm sorry, I don't I don't know what else to say. We treat our doctors and our nurses like garbage. We treat our
Yep.
frontline workers, all of them, like trash. Like our government treats them like trash, basically. They don't respect them. They don't respect their time. And there's this business aspect of unions that is also taking advantage of them and taking them for granted. It's all this mess. Add a pandemic to it, and now we're never going to get out of this without shedding more blood, unfortunately. Like, this is just not even the worst of it. Anticipate with more lockdowns. If there's another lockdown, there's just going to be a lot of problems, and at some point this province will rise up, and we'll be fed up, and I hope it doesn't get to that point, because when it does, it's going to be dangerous for everybody. It's like a pressure cooker. I'm getting anxious just talking about it.
Well,
That's my prediction anyway.
Oh no, I'm not disagreeing, but to touch on the doctor thing, Roman Baber just put that out. He's hearing from doctors that they're underemployed. We could create thousands of ICU beds just if we had adequate staffing, and a lot of doctors aren't getting their full wages either. And we laid off nurses in the second wave, but yeah, if that's where, like, I mean, you completely lost the narrative when you do stuff like that. We're in a pandemic, the hospitals, and then you release, I think it was 97 nurses or something like that during the second lockdown.
Yeah.
It's all these things, but to your point on this, it feels like a pressure cooker. Right now the protests are small-ish, but it's starting to change. Even in the last 2 weeks, I've been out covering events. I went to Brantford. What used to be like 50 or 100 people, and it would be the same people every time. And it was like 300 to 700, maybe 1,000, depending on like peak times. Mm-hmm. And then I went to Simcoe, and Simcoe was like hundreds, and like probably upwards of 700 to 1,000. And that's a small rural farming community. Then I went out to Leamington. They opened the family kitchen there. It was like 300 people at 24 hours notice. Hey, we're opening a restaurant. Come support us. And so I feel like that shift has already started, but if they don't, they have to, they're not going to make everyone happy. The back out point at this point, I don't know what it is, but the Karens and Kens aren't going to be happy. They're quite content staying in lockdown forever. I don't know that they understand, the people that are advocating lockdowns, I don't know that they understand the long-term repercussions of it. I think we talked about full cost benefit analysis a lot. Mm-hmm. But what's the repercussions of these decisions that are made in a vacuum with COVID? We've more money spent than both world wars combined now. Taxes are coming in. There's reports, yesterday's Gone report from the government of Canada, saying that higher taxes and service cuts are in the near future, basically. Yeah. And they're already talking about that. And then meanwhile, they're talking about rolling out UBI and things like this. So I don't know, but to me, I feel like they're intentionally imploding the financial system. That's my conspiracy hat. It's just I don't know how to make sense of it any other way, because again, we're broke and they're still offering more things. And I go to the grocery store and I've noticed it. I can't imagine being on a fixed income, but eggs, as an example, a dozen eggs from the beginning of pandemic was like $2.27. Now it's $3 plus. Yep. And that's just where I'm at. That's not a rural community that has to pay more. And then the carbon tax kicked in and all these things that are coming. And it's like a perfect pressure pot where it's going to boil over. And I worry about agent provocateurs and people that are going to be in those movements. I think Montreal was an example of that.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Watching these people come out and be violent out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. I think that's what we're going to see. The government's anticipating it, and I think they're going to wait for the boil over, and then all of a sudden you're going to start seeing people that don't look like they belong with the crowd come in, be violent, and then the police are going to come in heavy and hard. And I don't know where we're heading. Barrie has the military's up there now, reserve. Mm-hmm. They're apparently in Toronto, and I just got sent, actually, Steve here sent me a tweet. They're saying that they're not helping with any COVID stuff yet. That was how they worded it. So I'm getting kind of anxious on some of the moves here. I'm looking forward to getting out of Ontario. That's actually my plan, is to be in Saskatchewan by the end of summer. But do you worry about that from like the military perspective? Do you worry that they might get involved? Because that's kind of an out there thing to ask, but I'm seeing them in Barrie. I'm just worried that they're going to get to the point where they're literally going to try to say essential trips only and then have police and military kind of out in key areas.
To be honest, I'm not worried about it, but I wouldn't be surprised. So it lingers in the back of my mind as a what if scenario. I am still optimistic that we won't reach that point. I still think that there's time for our governments, both provincial and federal, to do the right thing, make the right decisions moving forward. Um, it's those you mentioned, those who want to stay in lockdown. Absolutely, it's their prerogative if they want to stay indoors, but we have a duty and a responsibility to protect people from the mental health issues and the consequences of this pandemic, the economic issues. And this is going back to what I preach on Sunday, preach the empathy. One person can comfortably stay home and because they work from home, and they look at their neighbor and who's complaining, and they're judging them harshly, as opposed to being empathetic and understanding that their situation is different than what their neighbor's going through. Like these restaurants, the restaurant industry took such a hard hit, and my heart broke when I heard that Doug promised no lockdown, told the restaurants to get back to work, and then within a week locking
Yep.
them down. That is just disgusting and insulting behavior from a government. It broke my heart for the restaurant industry that tirelessly worked out of their way to accommodate these new health measures. They've done a fantastic job in the past when they were allowed to serve, in keeping the space safe and socially distanced. And they did everything that they were asked to do, and they're the ones being punished for following the orders.
I spoke with a business owner from Covina, California, Carlos Roman of
Mm.
I can't remember the name of his place, but he has a gastro pub down there, and he basically said they can't. He's getting no support, no help. They offered a patio, and he got dinged. What happened was somebody ordered takeout. They shut down this patio, and so somebody stopped to eat on his patio, and he got hit with a fine, and they shut him down.
Wow.
And that's when he went viral, because he went off on the health inspector, blocked him in with his truck, and basically told him, if I can't work, you can't work. Bread and barley, there it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, restaurant owners have been hosed. And the other thing people seem to not understand on the restaurant thing, well, they can do takeout. It's part of the business plan when you offer indoor dining that I need X amount of those seats filled at lunch, X amount filled at dinner to break even, and X amount above it to make my profit margin. And people seem to, I don't know if they think government can just indefinitely bail or loan money, but
Yeah.
that seems to be the general attitude of people still advocating lockdowns.
Yeah, no, it's not finite. It's not infinite amount of money. Money doesn't grow on trees. And if we don't circulate that economy, if we don't revive that economy, there won't be any money to circulate. There won't be any taxes. And, and to create these subsidies and to create these benefits that we are currently reaping. So if at some point the CERB money, any form of social assistance is going to come to a really rude halt, if we don't do something about keeping our economy alive. And speaking of takeout, takeout only gets you so far. If there are people that think like me, those prices, we pay for the experience, the dining experience. I don't pay $50 for a steak just to take it out. I would just go to Food Basics or Loblaws and buy myself a steak and make it at home in that case, for less. People want, the restaurants offer this ambiance. That's what you pay for: the ambiance, the service, the catering, the hospitality. That all comes with the meal. It's not just the food itself. And it's so presumptuous of the government to just dismiss them and be like, well, just switch to takeout. How many jobs have been lost because of takeout only?
Well, that's what he said to me. He goes, my restaurant was never designed to be takeout. We were designed to be the place that you came in, you sat down. He goes, the food is basically, what do you call it? It's something that gets you in the door.
Mm-hmm.
He makes his money on alcohol. And since takeout, he said, I think he was down 20 to 30% of his overall sales. And that's where he makes all of his money. And so he's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, he's done everything. He's following all the rules. And then the rules just keep changing. But that's just one industry. I got another article I just put out. Somebody who owns a pet run where they house animals, house dogs, cats when people go on vacation. He's essential.
Mhm.
Doesn't qualify for any subsidies, down to 10 to 15% of his pre-pandemic
Yeah.
levels. And they just go, well, you don't qualify for anything. You're essential. You're open. And he's taken on $150,000 personal line of debt to just stay open. I asked him, I said, if you tomorrow things went back to normal and then 25% better than pre-pandemic levels, like 125% of sales, how long would it take to pay off that 150,000? He goes, a year to a year and a half.
Wow.
If things went back to normal and were way better,
Yeah.
that's how long. And so what we've done to people through these lockdowns is we don't know the damage yet because all the deferrals haven't happened. All the people who were basically
The banks
taking out
haven't.
loans,
Yeah.
they've just been taking out loans to stay open. So everything looks kind of okay right now, even though the cracks are showing in the surface. You just wait. The SEBA loans, they said they were going to take cash equivalent or business assets if you couldn't pay it back. The writing's on the walls. It's going to get bad. And I just worry that media is downplaying some of this.
Oh, 100%.
And not talking about it. And when I talk about it, it feels doom and gloom. And I almost feel like it's conspiratorial. Like I feel like there should be like some like puppet strings or something in behind me. It just doesn't feel right. But it's just something that needs to be talked about. It's like, this is not, I'm not crazy, am I?
No, you're absolutely right. People are not seeing the big picture right now. People are just, and it's because our government, like I remember Trudeau was saying this last year. Our government keeps saying, let's just get through this. The more you say that, the more short-sighted people become. The more people forget that, we need to forecast the next 10 to 20 years as well. We need to be realistic. And so everyone's just trying to get through this. They've got their blinders on and they're like, we're just going to, just live it day by day. But it's like, okay, yes, you can live day by day, but you also need to acknowledge that there is a massive tsunami coming. And you need to be prepared for it. You need a backup plan. You need to figure out what your end game here, because what's going to happen as soon as this pandemic is resolved, or as soon as things go back to normal, quote unquote, it's going to be 2008 times 100. Like, that's what I feel. I've been preparing for that, and I know I sound like a conspiracy theorist now, but I'm also very I like to be realistic. I like to make sure that I am grateful for every day that I wake up and I am still alive. I have a roof over my head. I have a family that loves me and that I love. And, I'm grateful for the ability to go out and take a breath. I live in Montreal right now. So, within the curfew hours, I can go out. I actually snuck out at 4:50 this morning and I felt like a badass. I went for a run. But you have to plan for the future. You do have to open your eyes to, oh my God, what's going to happen next? What am I going to do with all this debt?
If we do that in our personal lives, like, where's the disconnect? Wouldn't it be prudent that your government, they can do whatever they want. And then one of the things I always thought was funny is, like, if a person spends their credit card to the max, they can't spend anymore. Yeah. When a government spends the credit card to the max, they go ask another bank who gives them more money, which makes their money worth even less. And then eventually they can't even pay the interest, and we're heading there. I'm waiting for the collapse where it gets to the point where we're not going to be able to pay the interest on the debt. And it's getting worse because this is what I'm talking about. Like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. They're talking about UBI right now. They just passed it at the Liberal convention. The PBO office, Parliamentary Budget Office, said it'd be $80 billion annually. Yeah, we're broke. Wow. And this is where that conservative, conservative bias comes through. I don't think of myself as a conservative, but I just think of myself as thinking of 20 years down the road. And I guess if you want to label me conservative,
I'm thinking of my siblings, like my future, the future children. I think this is going to hurt so badly. It's, at what cost did these lockdowns, at what cost did we do these lockdowns? Nobody has thought of the circumstances. Nobody has thought of the consequences of these multiple lockdowns. I think that, I personally wouldn't be surprised if Doug has pretty much realized that he's not winning the next election. And so he's like, screw it. Let me just destroy this province with whatever. I don't care. I've got a majority government. I'm gonna just do whatever I want. That's how I feel like Dougie's thinking right now.
Emergency orders forever until then,
Yeah.
until he has to go into an election. No, we're just going to
Exactly.
extend that emergency out another month.
Oh my God, what a disaster. What a joke. I
I,
mean, I
I'm
look at New Zealand and
physically
I look at,
disappointed to be an Ontarian
yeah.
lately. It's just, sorry, I cut your thought off there.
Oh no, it's okay. I was just saying, I look at New Zealand, I look at Australia, I look at China. Everyone is, easing on restrictions,
When China's got more freedom than you.
and I'm like, where did we drop the ball? Because I'm a little confused. How did a G7 country do so poorly? And now recently we've surpassed in COVID cases, we've surpassed the USA. The US, we've been making fun of for the last year. I mean, I've been making fun of them for the last year. Now I've got my tail in between my legs and I'm like cowering in the corner, like, oh my God, I'm embarrassed.
Well, it's like, when China has more ability to go out and enjoy, like they're going to festivals and stuff right now. They definitely don't have more freedom. That was a bold statement. Let me roll that back. But they're able to go out and enjoy. They don't have curfews. There's no restrictions on their day-to-day life outside of the normal social credit communistic system that they live under. So, but no, it's like, how did we end up here as a G7 nation? I always point to Italy. I'll get your thoughts on this. We're almost ready to close here, but Italy was kind of the catalyst in my mind for lockdowns across democratic nations. And I found out something doing research there that 2013 to 2016, they'd experienced very high levels of influenza. And in 2016, they actually experienced more excess death from influenza than they did from the Second World War. And then they were concerned about the aging population going forward if another epidemic or something were to come forward. And then we looked at Italy. We seen what happened. So it's China locking people in. And we looked at Italy. And once Italy did it, I think democratic nations said, okay, I can too, and I'm going to. Mm-hmm. But what's your take on that? Like, where do you pin the lockdown blame on now? Like, a year out, you can't even pin it on them anymore. It's just personal choices at this point.
I wasn't opposed, and I still kind of am not. I wasn't opposed of the first lockdown. For me, when they said it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. So I wasn't opposed of the lockdown because I recognized how it caught the government by surprise. It caught us all by surprise. March 13th, I won't forget it. My CEO was like, pack your bags, you're going home. And I was like, oh, and he's like, yeah, take your office supplies. You're working from home until we further notice. So everybody was caught by surprise. And I think that a lockdown was a smart decision for government to pause and say, okay, what do we do? But at that moment, they needed to be the most efficient that they could have ever been, and gone into whatever virtual room that they go into, like a jury, spend hours, days, weeks figuring out how they're going to be proactive, how they're going to get us out of this lockdown, how they're going to make sure that they balance economy, physical health, and economic health, and also mental health, to make sure that there is as little deaths, as little losers as possible. And by losers, I mean like people who've lost, right? Because there's always, in a situation like this, you're always going to have people who lose. You're always going to have people who profit. You're always going to have people who come out of this barely breathing and alive, financially. But that's the government's job. I mean, why else do we elect them? It's their responsibility is to see what's in our best interest. So the first lockdown, I'm like, okay, you've got a month, let's say 2 months, to deliberate and figure out a game plan. But then they didn't, because the cases started dropping, and so did their guard. And somehow that became our fault. So that's my view on it. So when Italy went into lockdown, I think Italy had to too, because of the age demographic. I think that made a lot of sense. They couldn't keep up with the deaths. Unfortunately, it was tragic. And I think us doing it at the beginning was a smart decision, but then to constantly teeter-totter from lockdown, zone 3, zones orange, zone red, zone green, zone whatever, and then regional, that pissed me off the most when Doug Ford said, oh, Peel's gray, but Oakville is orange. What do you think people on Winston Churchill are doing? You think people on Winston Churchill and Mississauga are like, oh, hi, Oakville, we're locked down? No, they're crossing the street. Like, you don't regionally open. It doesn't make any sense. If you're the worst, like the best case scenario to regionally open a province would have been like, okay, everything north of Sudbury, open. Everything south of Sudbury closed until further notice. Like if you were to open regionally, that would have made sense. But people were willing to drive as far as Woodstock for, to go to a restaurant, to do activities. People are driving into Quebec to go enjoy some activities, to go enjoy some restaurants and some do their thing. So like this whole thing became a total mess after the first lockdown. So I completely am against them now.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't agree with the first lockdown only because I think of government historically and I don't trust them. And so it's like never give them that power.
Right.
So that's what goes through my head. But even still, like I do understand and I sympathize with where you're coming from, because I believe, like, I don't think they were caught off guard as much as we think they are. The civilian populace was caught off guard, but there was reports going through the military that were back in January and February, and then it was all like, so months later, and then they acted surprised. Yeah. But I think it's this question of like, I would never lock down, but it's because I think this was inevitable. Once they got it's just, they didn't have a real game plan. Unfortunately, Canadian governments seem to be inept just across the board. So to say they didn't come up with a plan, it's like, did you really expect them to?
I was optimistic.
Like I wanted to be true. I wanted to think of them like deliberating behind closed doors. We were up till midnight. Meanwhile, like they're out. Who knows what they were doing? But like, I don't know. So I think, okay, who's in charge of the province then too? So I'm sure you've heard the slipped audio or whatever you call it.
Oh
Premier Ford, he said, I'm not going to go against my medical doctors. I might as well throw a rope around my neck and jump off a bridge. And then his chief medical officer's on hot mic. He said, I just say whatever they write down for me.
Yeah. So wow. Who's in charge exactly? It's a shit show, really. I've given up. My optimism from last year on the first lockdown has gone way down to like absolutely nothing now. I'm so disappointed, and all I can do is write. So that's what I'm going to do, is just write about it.
There we go. We're excited to bring you on. I know you have a lot. It's going to be a good experience. So for everybody here that's in the chat on divergemedia.ca, after Hazar gets her first article out, Sunday is her publishing date. We're going to put a tab somewhere there that will say Sunday Preach, and all of her work we're going to locate under there so that you can find it easily on our site as well. But definitely check out her work. Is there anything you want to leave everyone here with?
Just thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for the opportunity of letting me, present my point of view, my perspective. A lot of the times it's a bit edgy. I like to, one of my favorite things to do is call people out on any side of the spectrum. I like to try and keep it as minimally biased as possible with a little bit of flair.
She's going to hit me one of these days when I'm not expecting it.
Hey, I expect the feedback as well. So I welcome any comments, any criticism, any feedback. It helps me grow. It helps me, keep an open mind and learn new perspectives as well. So that's the whole point of Sunday Preach. That's the whole point of Diverge Media, is we want to have an open dialogue. We're not going to agree with each other on every topic, and that's the point. Otherwise, we just have an echo chamber, and who wants to be in an echo chamber these days? They're nauseating. So
yeah, well, that's our slogan here at Diverge, is stories that matter. Truth falls where it falls, and I have to check myself on that sometimes, because it's really hard to put your bias aside sometimes, especially when you want to be right. And the more you've invested in a certain viewpoint, the more hesitant you are to actually be open to information that would prove
absolutely
wrong. So it's always a fine line, but I'm glad we're on the same book in that regard. I'm very excited to bring you on.
Thanks so much, Greg. I appreciate it. And just one more thing, don't be afraid of your biases, though. Sometimes it's good to be a little biased. There's such thing as a healthy bias. So
trust your gut, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes there's a reason he was wearing a ski mask and a sweater and it's 30 degrees out, but I didn't want to not trust him because I want to be a good person. Yeah. It's like, trust your gut sometimes. Trust your bias sometimes.
Thanks again, right. Greg.
That's a great one. Let's end it off. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Bye.